another episode of PTSD and Beyond. It's incredible when you have a guest come in, and then when you have them come back a second time, it's like it even makes it even better. Today, we've got something that we're going to focus on, which really touches the heart of people. And I say the heart of people because the entire month of February at PTSD and Beyond Podcast, we're focusing on relationships. And now when people think about relationships, especially in February, we think about like our people that we love, and we're going to go out and have dinner, and we're going to have a really nice evening, and we're going to show gratitude and appreciation for the person and people in our life that we love. And hopefully that includes ourselves. There's one part about relationships that we don't talk a lot about. And I think it's a Western thing why we don't talk a lot about it. We don't talk about it, we don't address it. And that topic is of grief in relationships, trauma in relationships, and the emotional healing. And what does all of that stuff mean? Well, today, like I mentioned, we've got a person who's coming back for a second time on PTSD and Beyond. Brett is a author, as we mentioned before. And more importantly, I want you to understand that the work that Brett Cotter does is with stress and its relationship with Eastern ways of doing things. And why I stress that is because when we open ourselves up to a world of possibility and a world of different ways of doing things, and you'll hear from Brett's work and his story, it means that we can also experience that level of wellness and emotional healing. So let's welcome back for a second time to PTSD and Beyond, author of and founder of Stress Is Gone, Brett Cotter. Hey, Brett.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on again. Very exciting.
Sure. Absolutely. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, especially for listeners to listen to the stuff we're going to cover today for February on relationships. So let's just jump right into it. So talk with us about your experiences of helping people when, say, someone calls you and they say, I've got a breakup and I feel like crap.
So over my last 2 decades of, coaching, a lot of clients have come to me with, that pain, that depression, that sorrow from a breakup, from a long-term relationship. And just talking about it now, I'm getting flooded with a few memories from clients where in the session, when we were, unlocking the cellular memories underneath all this pain, it would always go back to fear of abandonment. And I can't tell you how many people had the memory surface of them waking up in a crib or a bed with having no one around and the door closed and them just crying, right? So one person in particular woke up, actually had the memory of climbing out of her crib, running through the house, no one's there, completely panicked, and then went outside around the backyard and then found her grandmother there gardening. So I feel the pain and the panic from, a relationship breaking up and losing that person from your daily life comes down to the fear of abandonment and what happens to me now. And it's such a deep pain because we've had it for so long since we were young. And everyone has that experience of, whether they remember it or not, of being a kid, being in a room, being by yourself and being upset because you're all alone, right? So that's kind of where I feel it goes back to, that fear of abandonment and that loss. And it brings up all the other feelings from all the other relationships, all that stuff that wasn't processed. Some people go through a breakup and to not feel the pain, they might jump into another relationship and without doing the kind of proper vetting before letting someone close to you, to making sure they're deserving of being close to you. And then the cycle happens again, So yeah, I would say that that's the core for me in my coaching experience. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about this fear of abandonment. So when we usually talk about fear and abandonment, I shouldn't say usually, but people think about those two as being separate, but they really are interconnected.
Right. So when you're all alone, that fear that it can overtake your entire body. It kind of shakes you to the core. The idea and the emotion of not having another person there and you're anxious, you're fearful. So it's a very powerful thing that, if you, and there's that technique, the Ferber technique, I guess, for kids, that you just let them cry for certain periods of time, to help them get over that. I don't know how great it is, but I know that it's a well-known, technique. It'd be interesting to see how, later on in life they relate, to the opposite sex, and how fearful they are when it comes to, abandonment issues.
Yeah, I was going to say there's other study. What's interesting about studies is there's always a study to invalidate another study. And
Right.
so, and I say that because when people will, if you present at the AP or something, I mean, I have done that and people have pushed back, and I just stand there and smile because of course there's always going to be another study to invalidate, or somebody to say, when you're presenting, well, I tried that and it doesn't work for me. Or, I don't like that particular technique. And so, we can go off on and have another episode specifically based on fear and abandonment. And I want to say there's a Goldilocks. I believe there's a Goldilocks, just right tempo with and pulse on self-soothing versus learning to self-soothe, because self-soothing is part of that abandonment work, along with the codependency. So we've got like the extremes, right? And how do we have that Goldilocks, temperature, if you will? But there are other ways that people can experience abandonment with relationships, whether it's been a loss through a divorce, a loss through a death, or even an unexpected, such as maybe a person had to move. So it doesn't have to be catastrophic where someone's passed away and it's permanent. It can also mean that someone's moved away from a person. So if we look at adults and we look at kids, what are some things that we can share with folks that are going to be helpful for when we do have that sense of loss?
So something that just resonated with me, and I had an image when you were talking, when you mentioned self-soothe. And then just to briefly mention that Ferber method again, imagine if that method was integrated with, when the parent did come in, they put the child's one hand on their heart and the other hand on their stomach and just breathed with the child. Maybe it would take 2 months for the child to automatically start doing that, right? To self-soothe and breathe when they were upset. And that would be, I feel, a really positive thing. So now moving forward to adolescents and, adults, the self-soothing and self-healing, I feel, reconnects a person with their source, right? I just want to go through a quick question and answer thing with you, which is what I do with folks a lot. So you can just play with me here. So I'll ask somebody, I'll say, what are you, right? So if I'm asking you that, how would you answer that?
I would say that I'm part human, part energetic being, because I think that I do believe in energy.
For sure. Then my second question is, what happens to your body when you permanently leave it?
The physical body decomposes, but I believe that your soul self continues. I mean, I've had experience with that, so I know that, life is eternal, but our life is eternal as our soul self.
Right. So what do you bring to your body? If when you permanently leave your body decomposes, what do you bring to your body?
Energy.
So what are you?
I'm energy.
Right. So the self-soothing reconnects somebody with their own energy.
Right.
Right. Outside of the whole idea that they were connected to this other person. Right. So when a relationship fails, a relationship is kind of funny. It plays a little mind game with you when you bring someone into your life as a relationship, because you have your nuclear family, right, that you grew up with. And these are usually, like, let's say, your support system in life, right? People you could call, people you love, people you depend on, people you could go to if there's a problem. Now the relationship comes in, and now all of a sudden your body thinks like, hey, this is like a person that's like within my support system. But a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, let's say the relationship doesn't work out and the person's gone. So now this is traumatic for your brain to figure out now what happens to me? Where's that leg of my support system, for my daily life. So you almost feel like you lose part of yourself, right? So you do, but how cool would it be if you could self-soothe and bring in your own energy and reclaim yourself where you gave yourself to that other person and that other person left. So
Yeah.
each relationship makes you more in tune with yourself, more in tune with your own energy when that relationship breaks up. So you're bringing your true nature to your next relationship. And that's what I really focus people on that come to me about, I just want to attract, my, next relationship. I'm tired of being single. So, okay, what are you looking for? A lot of times I get
Mm-hmm.
physical descriptions, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, well, how's that worked out for you so far? Oh, well, I had three of my last 3 or 4 relationships, fit into that, and it didn't work out. Okay. And I say, well, what about just looking for a kind person? What's really important, right? What about a kind person that you're compatible with? And I want to share a story with my own life, right? Our last podcast, we touched on some of my relationship patterns / problems, right? So um, this was really unique. I was 37 years old. I just had a breakup, and I'm walking in a park, and I was like, really, like, what's going on? I'm like talking to God. I'm like walking in the park. I say, why am I still single? I'm a decent person. I'm decent looking. Why am I still single? And like clear as day, I heard, you are used to loving a woman you're deeply upset with. Okay. And then I was like, holy shit. I saw an image of my mom, right, from my parents' divorce when I was 6. I unconsciously blamed her for the divorce, right? It was too painful for me to blame my father for the divorce because he was no longer in the picture. I missed him too much. But there's my mom. So who am I going to blame? Her.
Right.
The conflict is she's also the source of my love, right? As a little boy, that's the source. She's given me unconditional love. She's my security. She's my rock. But I'm deeply upset with her. So that set the stage for all of my relationships up until that moment in the park, right? All my relationships mirrored my parents' relationship. It was hot and heavy, went down in a blaze of glory. I was left, holding a lot of pain each one. And then when I had that realization, when the universe gifted me with that knowledge that I'm used to loving a woman that I'm deeply upset with, and it stemmed back from my early childhood, I was able to reprogram through the power of the spoken word how my brain worked and how my heart worked and how my receptors worked. So I just sat on a bench and started saying nice and calmly, simple, clear affirmations. And I was literally feeling my body change. And it was amazing. So one of the things I was saying is that I am good enough, I'm willing, able to receive a compatible, loving, kind soulmate. So the key here for me was a compatible soulmate. I
Right.
feel like all my relationships, they were so intense. They were all soulmates, right? Some people think you only have one soulmate. I believe you have many, many soulmates, but you have possibly one compatible soulmate, right? And that's what I wanted to attract. That's what I believed I was worthy of. And then I would say, even though all my relationships were like this, and even though my childhood was like this, I'm worthy and deserving of unconditional self-love, of loving myself, giving and receiving love unconditionally to my partner, and I'm worthy of attracting a kind, like-minded person that I'm physically, emotionally, and mentally and spiritually attracted to. So I was totally reprogramming how I was attracting my mate. I was really calling in my mate at that time. And then another thing that I was doing to call in my mate was there was a love song by an R&B singer that I like, Raphael Sadiq. And I would sing it in the car along with the song, but there was no one in the seat next to me, but I was singing it as if she was there, singing it to her. Right?
Yep.
So I was really trying to bring in a lot of positive energy around this being my mate. So my next relationship was with my wife, and we've been married for 5 years now. We dated for a year, and I said if it goes as good as I think it's going to go, I'm going to get engaged with her. I'm going to get engaged to her. I'm going to ask her to marry me after a year. So we did that, and then we were engaged for 2 years, and then we were married for 5. And it's been an amazing, reflective experience for both of us.
That's great. That's a great
Yeah,
story.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Stories like that give people hope and inspiration. And I think what's interesting about this is that the thought process that it wasn't even a process really, but the way that you had the deep reflection and the awareness of the reflective what to say, how to say it. I agree with that completely because there are times when people will ask me the same questions, why am I single? When am I going to find him? When am I going to find her? And what I help people understand too is that it's not a one-way street. It's reciprocated. So they're looking for them just as much as, you know, those other folks are looking for the person who's asking. So he's looking for her just as much as she's looking for him. She's looking for her just as much as she's looking for her, right? And as opposed to it's a one-way street. And the other thing about what you said too is that when you allow yourself to say, you know what, I'm a decent person. I'm a decent person and this is what I'm looking for and I'm open to receiving that as well as they're looking for me too. So at some point our journeys and our paths are going to come to a crossroads and we're going to say, "Hey," and they're going to say, "Hey." And then the journey continues together. And that
Right.
intersection will happen.
Right.
Right.
So the question that most people ask is, when am I going to find her? When am I going to find him? The real
Mhm.
question is, when am I going to find myself?
Right. Right.
That's the question to ask. And really deep down, it's not as difficult as most people think, to be honest. I mean, really, you have to, write out what you want to be, core qualities of what you want to be.
Right.
Decide to be that. It could be one thing. It could be two things. It could be three things. And then focus on being that person. And those affirmations that I did broke the bonds in the beliefs of my previous self that was just manifesting one um, fiery relationship after the next that wasn't built for anything long term, right? So it was just a matter of breaking those bonds, recreating the bonds that I truly wanted myself to be, but also addressing the deeper issues of understanding why I was like that, right? So I feel in order to attract your compatible soulmate, there's a certain level of self-realization and actualization and introspection
Mhm.
that comes to it um, before you arrive at that place. And that's the beautiful process of also self-soothing, embracing any part of you like it's your own child, right? Because it really is. Whenever you're
Right.
in pain, that is your inner child in pain, right? Whenever you're angry or upset, whenever you're depressed, that's a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old child that has not processed something. So what would you do if you saw yourself that young? You'd probably embrace them, hug them, and self-soothe. So that's what I do with one hand on my belly button, one hand on my heart, breathing deep and slow. And then when I'm doing inner child work to myself, I'll say, we're okay now. We made
Right.
it through. We made it through.
Right.
We're okay now. And I stay with it until I see that child's face look up at me with either calmness or happiness, right? Until the emotions have changed, um, I stick with the exercise. But the self-soothing, I feel, is such an important key to understanding who we are, embracing our pain, and then setting the stage to attract a compatible soulmate so that we're not bringing all the same baggage to the next relationship, right?
Right.
It's almost like how many of you, by a show of hands, are, tired of the same old relationship patterns, right? I'm sure my hand would have went up, you know,
Right. Right.
nine
Exactly.
nine years ago. Yeah,
And the
so
other the other thing too, when you mention about self-soothing, is that I hope that listeners are when they're hearing Brett talk, that you're also hearing I'm self-reliant. I think one of the
mm,
biggest things that people look for initially is that the fingers pointed externally. That's going to help me, right? That person's going to do it. That thing's going to do it. And what listeners, I believe, get value from our podcast as well as the chat is that they're given tools to use if they choose to use it, and as they develop and use the tools consistently, they develop a skill. And it's not a skill like, oh, I'm an Olympic swimmer, but it's a skill that makes them and develops them into a self-sufficient individual. So I'm able to soothe myself. And why I'm bringing this up is because there are so many people with post-traumatic stress that look externally and they'll do things such as drink alcohol or do drugs. They're looking for a coping mechanism that's not healthy. And when a person reaches a point where they are able to self-soothe at the level that we're talking about here, then those addictions then become, I don't need to do that anymore. I have another way.
Right. So when you were talking, I had an image pop into my head. Last year I was coaching middle school football, and whenever one of the players didn't do what their responsibility was, and the coach would go over to him, the head coach, and he would say, what happened? And they would start to blame somebody else. He would say, don't be a finger guy, be a thumb guy. And then he would use his thumb and point it towards his chest, right? So it's like, look, so what I would say, how that relates to us here in this conversation is look inside. You know, when you're looking outside, flip it, put a mirror in front of yourself and look inside, and the solutions are in there.
Right.
You know, like that John Lennon lyric, there's no problems, there's only solutions. There's so many problems in the world. Just think in the terms of solutions.
Right.
When something's happening, think in terms of solutions. So one of the techniques that I do personally, and I also teach this, is when there's a perplexing situation at work, what we do is we get into a deep meditative space. And when the mind is clear and the body's calm, allow that image of the situation to play out in your mind, in your imagination. And then you pause it right before you would normally react to it. And then you would ask all the space in your meditation, you ask, basically you're asking the universe, what's the best way to handle this for all involved? And then you press play and you just see what signs the universe shows you on how to handle it, right? So I use that all the time, especially when I'm faced with a fork in the road in certain decisions in life. I'll stop and I will be in a meditative space. In the fork, I'll actually go down one road, see where it goes, and I'll come back, go down the other one. And it really is a clear way to solve problems. But again, I'm looking within myself. And
Right.
that is the biggest gift that all my teachers that I've come across left with me. You know, they only taught me for so long. And then they were like, boom, look within yourself.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely. So to touch on looking in ourselves, so the other part about abandonment is that people will feel, loneliness, right? Which then goes into, hopelessness. And I often say to folks, when we become comfortable with ourselves, then the loneliness isn't really lonely. We miss being around somebody, we miss having a significant other in our life. But there's a difference between being lonely and experiencing loneliness. And I believe that the energy and the emotions with each are different. And one causes us to react more, where the other is I'm learning to be comfortable in my space first, and then it means since I'm okay with myself, right? I'm in a good place, and I'm open and I'm ready for someone to walk in my life, and I'm open and ready to walk into someone else's life.
Right. And I feel neediness versus like being independent, that plays into how much a person feels lonely and lonesome when they're by themselves, right? And I think that goes into one's ability to self-soothe, going back
Right.
to the fear of abandonment. If you have the skills of self-soothing in a positive way, not going to a bar, not having drinks, not smoking, whatever, you're able to naturally call upon your own divine energy through touching certain chakras in your body, your heart, your stomach. That's what I do with my belly button and my heart center. And I'm breathing deep and slow. I'm calling more of myself in to fill the void of loneliness. So my own energy always answers the call. It just takes a little time. You just got to be patient. And again, that's focusing on the solution versus the problem. So often our mind will let us go down the toilet bowl when we're faced with a problem.
Isn't
Right?
that true?
So
So
don't
let me,
go ahead.
I was going to say that's so true. So how, because I was going to say, how can we help people? I mean, real briefly, because I mean, this is a podcast and I'm sure you do workshops on this. So how can we help people get in touch with their inner self, that inner energy to be able to do self-soothing? How do we help people
So
understand what that means and how to do it?
embrace it, almost like a kid that's been left in the corner, right? Part of ourselves have been left in the corner. So get excited for the feeling within yourself. When you start feeling that way, you feel lonely. It's like, oh my God, I want to put my arms around you. Be excited that the universe has allowed you to feel the loneliness that is showing up, right? And embrace it. Give yourself the space to express your emotions, right? If I feel like crying, I let myself cry, right? And then literally within like a minute, it's over. I'm not afraid to cry. Whatever I'm feeling inside, if it's a really strong feeling, I'll express it verbally. And let's say I'm upset with, it could be my wife, my brother, my mother, anybody, or myself. I'll go for a walk and I will let the words out. It's kind of like a Jedi mind trick for your emotions. You don't have to say it to the person. You just have to get it out, because
Right.
it's not to say your feelings feel real, but that's not to say in the heat of the moment that your feelings are true between you and the other person. So what I do is I express the words, the feelings leave because I gave them a voice, and then I come back to the situation with more clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I would say the self-soothing component, if you're with a partner now in a relationship that's very triggering, and relationships are triggering, right? That's part of the gift of the relationship. The other person is pushing you to bring up your issues, right? So they can leave. The problem is if we're playing ping pong with each other nonstop with the issues
Right.
and the karma and the
Mm-hmm.
chemicals of it, and then it gets toxic, right? So
Right.
use the issues in your relationship to get to know yourself, right? And go for a short walk, express how you're feeling, come back to the situation or to your partner with more clarity, and then embrace whatever is happening. Those feelings of loneliness, if it's a breakup, just use it as a chance. Be excited to embrace it, right? It's just embracing a part of yourself that was abandoned, that felt lonely, that was left alone. Literally, that was probably left alone at some point when you were a kid. So you're picking that kid up and you're bringing him back into the fold of self-love.
That is so true because, and I can speak from my own experience of losing my papu early before right before my fifth birthday, and that was very difficult, especially when we look at how people and families, process, loss.
Mm.
So, we've got a couple minutes here yet to go, and I'm wondering if to the person who's listening right now, who might even be crying, who might even be having a lot of emotion because our conversation resonates so much with them about, fear and abandonment and how we can self-soothe and how we can learn how to do that. What are three things that if you could sit with someone right now, a listener who's saying this means something to me. I get all of this. What would you say to that person, Brett?
If they're feeling it now, I would lay down, put one hand on your chest, one hand on your stomach, breathe into the feelings that are driving all these tears. Breathe into it. Let the breath move silky smooth in and out of your body, allowing the breath to move through the emotions, and embrace the emotions on the inside with your breath. Embrace the emotions on the outside with your hands. And in the next few minutes of doing that, allow yourself to experience energetic healing and your own energy coming back into your body, and knowing that this all is an act of self-love and evolution and growth, just for you to get to know your true nature and to heal on the inside.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
As you were talking, my office is on the north side of my house. And as you were speaking, my office got really bright. And I
Mm.
have a window, and I'm looking at the window like, why is my office getting really bright right now? Because it usually doesn't happen that way, and it's in the middle of winter right now, and well, not the middle, but pretty much so in Minnesota. That was extremely powerful. Brett, I want to
And
thank you so much for coming on today. What's the last comment you want to make here, honey?
let the light in.
Let the light in. That's
Hmm.
beautiful. Folks, again, a heartfelt thank you to author and founder of Stress is Gone, Brett Cotter. Again, we'll have Brett's information posted in the summary of the PTSD and Beyond podcast here. Anybody can reach out to you. Again, why don't you go ahead real quickly and say to folks what your email is, Brett?
Sure. It's Brett with two T's, BRETT at stressisgone.org. And that's the website. You could go to stressisgone.org. And the workbook is 3 Keys to Managing PTSD. And that's currently on Amazon.
Fantastic. And we'll have that link for folks to go ahead and go on to Amazon and purchase the workbook. Thanks again so much, Brett, for being on today. And we'll see everybody next time on PTSD and Beyond.
Thank you so much.